This is an adaptation of a presentation given by Clive Stapleton, the nephew of Cyril Stapleton, to the Newport Pagnell Historical Society on the 16th of September, 2025. Sergeant Cyril Stapleton grew up in the town of 1920s and 1930s, then went on to join the Royal Air Force and participate in World War II. It should be understood that this presentation is put together from lots of information sources but without Cyril's RAF logbook, which would have been very useful, so there may be a few anomalies and gaps as we go through the presentation. The story starts on November 8, 1924, when at St Mary's Church in the quaint small North Buckinghamshire village of Hardmead, Beatrice Evelyn Bennett, the eldest daughter of George and Amelia Bennett the Hardmead gamekeepers, married Leonard Stapleton, youngest son of Bill and Jane Stapleton of Newport Pagnell. Following their wedding, the couple moved to a small house in Beaconsfield Place, Newport Pagnell. This is convenient for Len as it is near to Newport Pagnell railway station, where he travels by train to work daily at the Wolverton Railway Carriage Works. Less than 2 months after their wedding, on January 2, 1925, Len and Beatrice welcomed a baby boy. They named him Cyril, probably in honor of Len's brother who had passed away a few years earlier from pneumonia while serving with the British Army at the end of World War I. In the years that followed, Cyril was joined by his siblings. Alan in 1926, Brian in 1930, Mary in 1932, and finally, Derek in 1936. During this time, the family built place. However, as the family grew, the conditions became increasingly difficult, especially during the economic hardships of the 1930s. Despite the challenges, Len had a stable job at Wolverton Works, although his pay was modest since he was a semi-skilled worker serving as a blacksmith striker in the Wolverton Works smithy. In the mid-1930s, the family moved from their cramped house in Beaconsfield Place, Newport Pagnell, to a brand-new, 4-bedroom council house on the outskirts of Newport Pagnell, located on London Road opposite Rennie Lodge Hospital. With more space and larger gardens, life improved significantly, and this house became the family's permanent residence for over 40 years. During this time, the grandparents at Hardmead provided invaluable support to the family, with the eldest children, Cyril and Alan, spending weekends with them. Their grandfather, a gamekeeper, introduced Cyril and Alan to the countryside lifestyle, including working with dogs and handling sharp guns. Experience had a significant impact on Alan, who would develop a keen interest in nature, and Cyril's familiarity with firearms would become important in the years to come. On April 8, 1939, the Stapleton family of Newport Pagnell gathered for a grand celebration of Cyril's grandparents Bill and Jane Stapleton's diamond wedding anniversary. The event took place at the church house in Newport Pagnell, a building whose distinctive brickwork around the door remains visible today. Len, Cyril's father and the 11th child of Bill and Jane, was notably absent from the photo due to his illness with pneumonia, which had him convalescing at a railway workers' home in Dawlish, Devon. Despite Len's absence, the photo captures most of the family members, all of whom had ties to Newport Pagnell. Many have since moved away. During this challenging time, Cyril, being the eldest, took on additional responsibilities to support his mother with responsible family duties he would retain even after his father returned from convalescence. After the party, leftover cakes were loaded onto Derek's pushchair to be taken home, but the mile-long walk from the church house through the town centre and up London Road proved too tempting for Cyril and Alan, who ate all the food before reaching home. Cyril's fascination with aircraft began at a young age, leading him to join the newly established ATC Air Training Corps, Newport Pagnell Flight. A photograph from the early 1940s captures Cyril with fellow Newportonians with the ATC. This highlights his burgeoning interest in aviation. Unlike many of the Newport Pagnell Stapletons, who excelled in local football and cricket teams, Cyril had no interest in sports. He once told his brother, Alan, that he didn't see the point in kicking a bladder of wind around a field and found cricket balls far too hard. Cyril's dedication to aircraft and flight was evident in his model plane building and his study of current aircraft types. His youngest brother, Derek, fondly recalls a day when Cyril took him to Wolverton via the Newport railway line. In Wolverton, they visited Lake Brothers, an ironmonger and model shop, where Cyril purchased a balsa-wood model. Cyril developed an extensive knowledge of aircraft and flight and had good aircraft recognition skills that would prove invaluable in the years to come. Following his completion of schooling at Newport Pagnell School, Cyril spends 1 year doing technical training at Wolverton College of Further Education before getting a job at the Wolverton Railway Carriage and Wagon Works. At age of 16 he became an apprentice brass finisher in the Wolverton Works brass workshop. This period was wartime, with the country at war with Nazi Germany, who were threatening to invade and conquer the United Kingdom. This whole war thing upset young Cyril, and one day he told Alan how he wanted to contribute towards the war, saying, "You ain't going to win the war in Wolverton Works." Around his 18th birthday in January 1943, Cyril leaves his apprenticeship at Wolverton Works and volunteers to pursue his passion for aircraft and flight in the RAF, and also help to stop the war against Germany. On February 23, 1943, Cyril enlists in the Royal Air Force and is assigned to No. 2 Recruitment Centre at RAF Cardington, near Bedford. Here, he undergoes induction and basic military training. During this period, assessments are conducted to determine the most suitable role for Cyril within the RAF. As a result, he is selected for aircrew training, with a focus on becoming an air gunner. On July 7, 1943, Cyril was posted to the 14 Initial Training Wing (ITW) at RAF Bridlington, a base established by repurposing various buildings and hotels in the seaside town of Bridlington, Yorkshire. The headquarters were located in the former South Cliff Hotel. During his induction as an RAF air gunner, Cyril received a complete air gunner's kit and underwent extensive training. This included becoming proficient in handling machine guns, even blindfolded, and honing shooting skills through clay pigeon shooting. Additionally, he received basic lessons in Morse code and signaling, achieving speeds of up to 20 words per minute. Part of the training also involved learning ditching procedures, which included jumping from a height of 15 feet off Bridlington Pier. In the summer of 1943, Cyril returns home for summer leave. These photographs were taken by the local Newport Pagnell journalist Gerald Stratton of Cyril in his military uniform, including the striped peak cap denoting he was in air crew training. There was also a treasured shot of all the family together. On the 21st of August, 1943, Cyril was posted to No. 12 Air Gunnery School at RAF Bishop's Court in Northern Ireland. At that time, the school was newly established, and Cyril was part of the 3rd Air Gunner course. The primary goal of the training was to teach how to operate a machine gun from utilized Avro Anson aircraft, with dummy targets towed into the air by Miles Martinet aircraft. During his time there, Cyril wrote a letter to his brother Alan for his 17th birthday in October 1943.
Dear brother, many happy returns of the day. This is the first time, but I spend no end of time writing to one another. It gets a bit boring when there's a good show on, so now I go to the shows and miss writing. I've got Mum's letter today, but it wasn't censored, so she could have put about the discovery in Berryfield. I'm very curious, but I expect it's only a dud bomb. I'm certain you all are present each from Ireland, so when I get on leave, I'll give them to you all. But but I'll not say what they are. Here, wishing you again a happy birthday, and cheerio, your brother, Cyril.
In September 1943, Cyril excelled in the gunnery test, achieving an impressive score of 79%. By October 23 of the same year, he had earned the rank of Sergeant Air Gunner in the RAF, completing his training at RAF Bishop's Court. This significant milestone was celebrated by the local Newport Pagnell newspaper, which featured a congratulatory message from the officers and cadets of the Newport Pagnell ATC. Cyril's accomplishment was particularly noteworthy as he became the first member of this flight to be awarded his wings. On October 26, 1943, after being promoted to sergeant, Cyril was assigned to the 17 Operational Training Unit, OTU, at RAF Silverstone at Irweston. He joined No. 72 course and spent most of his time with the gunnery flight at Irweston, a satellite station near Brackley, a few miles from the main 17 OTU base at Silverstone. At this OTU, aircrew were trained to fly bombers as a cohesive team, preparing them for operational missions. In 1943, the Vickers Wellington was the primary training aircraft at 17 OTU, featuring gunning positions at the front and rear, known as the tail end Charlie location. Additionally, a small flight of Miles Martinet target Tige aircraft supported the gunnery training at Irweston. Records indicate that Cyril's course flew intensively around the Christmas period, allowing for a 2-week leave in January after completing the course. During this time, Cyril sent a Christmas card home to his family in Newport Pagnell. On February 2, 1944, Cyril was assigned to the 51 Supply Base at RAF Swinderby, Lincolnshire, which served as the Heavy Bomber Conversion Unit, HCU, for No. 5 Group of the RAF. During the Second World War, No. 5 Group was based and covered the operational bombing airfields in Lincolnshire. Lincolnshire would later be known as Bomber Country. At the HCU, aircrew were trained to fly and operate the RAF's large 4-engine heavy bombers, including the Short Stirling, Handley Page Halifax, and Avro Lancaster. These aircraft led the primary bombing offensive by the RAF during the latter part of World War II, from 1942. Most of the training was conducted with the Short Stirling, which had largely been taken out of frontline duty by the Lancaster. Some Avro Lancasters were also used for HCU, as this would be the main bomber aircraft for No. 5 Group. Many training flights were known as cross-country and took place across England, Scotland, and Wales, where the risk of encountering enemy aircraft was low. On one such mission, a group of bombers flew over Newport Pagnell, and Cyril's father, Len Stapleton, observed them. From one of the gunner positions, a toilet roll was thrown out of the aircraft, streaming to the ground. Len chuckled and thought to himself, "That must be Cyril." Cyril's service record indicates that he completed his time with the 51 Supply Group on April 30, 1944. However, it wasn't until June 16, 1944, that the 207 Squadron Operation Record Book at RAF Spilsby documented his posting into the squadron. At that time, RAF Spilsby was a new airbase and was located a few miles inland from the Lincolnshire resort town of Skegness. Unlike many airmen who transitioned into squadron operations from training as a bomber crew, Cyril joined the squadron alone. He was assigned to the crew of Pilot Officer John Hotspur Wilson, a Scotsman from St Andrews. The Wilson crew had already completed 9 operational missions with the 207 Squadron but had experienced several crew rotations, particularly among the air gunners. The Wilson crew were flying an Avro Lancaster with squadron registration EMG and serial number LM125, which had been delivered as a new aircraft from the Armstrong Whitworth factory in Coventry. Cyril took on the role of mid-upper gunner, a position that offered one of the best observation points on the Lancaster. His aircraft recognition skills, honed in his youth, were invaluable in monitoring the airspace of the plane for potential threats. Cyril's first mission with 207 Squadron was a raid on the 22nd June 1944 against a synthetic oil plant in Wesseling, near Cologne, Germany. The squadron dispatched 21 Lancasters for this operation. Lancaster LM-125 EMG took off from Spilsby at 23:26, bombed the target at 1:45, and returned safely to Spilsby at 3:34. Unfortunately, the operation saw heavy losses, with 5 of the squadron's Lancasters failing to return. On this mission, the front gunner and bomb aimer was Flight Sergeant Dennis Deere, who was making his only flight with the Wilson crew. He survived his tour with 207 Squadron and the war, later providing an account of this operation many years afterward.
This was a Midsummer Night's trip. The forecast was for clear visibility, but in the event near 10/10 cloud, low, somewhat thin. I think the pathfinders marked on H2S. I also seem to remember a lot of activity with fighters and not a lot of flak. What searchlights there were reflected on cloud which would have shown us up to any fighters above. On the way back we dropped down to some stratus-like cloud which should at least have prevented us from being jumped from below. It was a clear visibility night on the way back, and we saw a twin-engined aircraft with a single rudder, assumed Ju-88, flying ahead of us and to port. The gunners asked if we should attack it. I recommended that I concentrated on watching him whilst they kept searching in other directions, in case he had a friend. At this time there was concern that fighters sometimes hunted in pairs, one distracting the bomber, even switching on navigation lights, whilst the other came out of the dark part of the sky. Anyway, this lad drifted off to port after about 10 to 15 minutes, but I remember I kept the crew to keep quiet unless there was something to report and to keep well alert, as there was obviously a lot going on. We got home okay. I had the impression that the crew thought it was not too bad, but I remember telling Wilson that he ought to make sure that they kept the chat down on the other trip.
The account provides a fascinating glimpse into the observation and monitoring of enemy aircraft, highlighting the crucial role of the gunners. It is highly likely that Cyril played a significant part in this process, diligently keeping the aircraft under surveillance. Cyril's second operation was on 25 June 1944 against a V-1 Doodlebug launch facility at Pommeryville in Normandy, France. The V-1, known as Doodlebug, was a primitive unmanned flying bomb powered by a pulse jet engine. Following the D-Day invasion, Hitler had turned V-1s loose to target southern England and were beginning to cause significant damage and casualties. Lancaster LM-125 EMG took off from Spilsby at 22:34, bombed the target at 0:09, and returned safely to Spilsby at 2:05. Cyril's third operation was on 27-28 June 1944 against a German Fortress and V-3 supergun at Mimoyex in the Hauts-de-France region. This V-3 supergun installation was targeted on London, however was never used and destroyed by Allied bombing in June-July 1944. Lancaster M125 EMG took off from Spilsby at 23:15, bombed the target at 0:53, and returned safely to Spilsby at 2:50. Cyril's fourth operation took place on the night of July 4 and 5, targeting a significant V-1 final assembly, storage, and distribution facility hidden in hillside caves at Saint-Lô-Desserent in the Oise region of France, approximately 40 kilometers north of Paris. This raid was a significant part of RAF Operation Crossbow, an extensive Allied campaign aimed at locating, attacking, and destroying Germany's V-weapon program VE-1, VE-2, and VE-3, before these weapons could strike Britain and Allied forces. Saint-Lô-Desserent was particularly vital as it served as a key point in the supply chain, delivering V-1s to launch sites in northern France for attacks against Britain. The operation consisted of 2 waves. The initial wave involved 617 Squadron, formerly the Dambuster Squadron, which had been repurposed to deliver the Barnes-Wallis-designed 12,000-pound tallboy bomb from specially modified Lancaster bombers. Wing Commander Leonard Cheshire led this wave, flying a Mustang donated by the U.S. Air Force to mark the target with flares. At 0:15, 17 Lancasters from 617 Squadron, along with one Mosquito, attacked the target with tallboy bombs. The main wave followed, comprising 231 Lancasters and 15 Mosquitoes from RAF Group 5, including 15 Lancasters from 207 Squadron at Spilsby, among them Lancaster LM-125 EMG. Unfortunately, Lancaster LM-125 EMG took off from Spilsby at 23:35, failed to return. Following the failure of LM-125 to return to RAF Spilsby after the St. Louis Desperate raid on July 5, a process was initiated to inform Cyril's family in Newport Pagnell that Cyril was missing. This news was eventually conveyed through a posting in the Buck Standard on August 19, 1944, stating that Cyril was missing from air operations. At that time, it was unclear whether Cyril had been killed, had bailed out and was evading capture, or had been taken prisoner. The uncertainty persisted until March 26, 1945, when the Buck Standard reported that the family had been informed from the casualty branch of the Air Ministry that Cyril was believed to have lost his life. At the end of the war, more information emerged about the fate of Cyril Lancaster and his crew. Their aircraft was shot down at 1:35 a.m. on July 5 and crashed into the Apemont Forest, between Apemont and Vigneulles-Saint-Firmin, killing all crew members. The crash site was only a few miles from their target, the caves at St. Louis Desperate, suggesting the aircraft was likely attacked during its bombing run. With the front gunner in the bomb aimer position, the aircraft was particularly vulnerable. A local French resident captured a photo of the remains of LM-125 in the forest after the crash. The occupying German forces retrieved the bodies from the wreckage and temporarily buried them nearby. After the war, the bodies were moved to their final resting place in the Crail Community Cemetery, maintained by the Commonwealth War Graves Commission. Crail is the local town near Apemont and St. Louis Desperate. It is understood that the German Luftwaffe put up stiff resistance that night, resulting in the loss of 13 out of 231 Lancasters on the operation. A total of 77 airmen were killed, 8 were taken as prisoners of war, and 9 evaded capture. Cyril's Lancaster was brought down by a Messerschmitt Me-109 from one JG-301, which had taken off from the Epinoy airfield in northern France. The Messerschmitt Me-109, Germany's primary fighter aircraft, lacked night flying aids. The Germans employed a tactic known as wild saw, wild boar, to target RAF bombers at night. This method relied on the pilot's eyesight, moonlight, and searchlights reflecting off clouds to locate their targets. On the night of July 4 and 5, 1944, there was 98% moonlight, which greatly favored this tactic. This attack method did have its disadvantages, and on July 21, 1944, a Me-109 of the same Group 1 JG-301 famously landed by accident at RAF Manstun in Kent after the pilot Lieutenant Horst Prenzel got lost while on an operation in northern France. Multiple German pilots, including Ernst Fischer and Ufs Hans Zahm of 1 JG-301, claimed to have shot down LM-125 EMG. The operation, conducted on July 4 to 5, 1944, against the St. Louis Desperate target, was part of a series of raids by the RAF and U.S. Air Force in July and August 1944 against this target. This site was crucial, as approximately 80% of all V-1 weapons aimed at southeast England were assembled and prepared for launch there. This chart shows the daily number of V-1 launches in the summer of 1944 and reduction in V-1 launches following the bombing by the RAF and U.S. Air Force. It is highly likely that these raids significantly reduced the rate of V-1 launches against the UK during the summer of 1944, preventing the saturation of the UK's air defences. This action by the RAF likely saved thousands of civilian lives in southern England. Despite its importance, the UK government at the time and post-war failed to recognise the significance of the RAF Bomber Command's efforts against the V-1 threat in northern France in 1944. Although Cyril lost his life in 1944, his memory is preserved through various memorials. For many years, his mother placed announcements in the Buck Standard to commemorate his death in July 1944. Cyril's grave in Cryel, France, is maintained by the Commonwealth Graves Commission. In Leicester Cathedral, the 207 Squadron Roll of Honour lists Cyril alongside the crew of LM-125 EMG. His name is also inscribed on his parents' grave headstone in Tickford Cemetery, Newport Pagnell. Additionally, Cyril's name is listed on the Newport Pagnell War Memorial outside the main Church of England of Newport Pagnell, St. Peter and St. Paul. At the Bomber Command Memorial in Lincoln, his name appears on one of the boards with other casualties of Bomber Command. Furthermore, there is a memorial at RAF Spilsby dedicated to all the men and women who served at the airfield from September 1943 to October 1945, maintained by the Friends of RAF Spilsby. Finally, shortly after the end of the Second World War, Peter Adams, a school classmate of Cyril, composed a heartfelt poem in tribute to Cyril.
He shared a desk at school with me, not so very long ago. He studied maths and geometry, at learning never slow. The call to arms came swiftly, he answered swiftly too. The last time I saw him, he was wearing Air Force blue. He helped to fly a bomber with his maths and agile brain, till one night over France, he never came back again. There were no medals for him, though tears were shed, I know, for the boy who shared a desk with me, not so very long ago.